I still remember the moment I found out my parents had stolen my daughter Megan's entire college fund. $45,000 we had saved over 15 years gone. They told her they needed emergency surgery money. I believed them too, until I saw my sister's Facebook post. There was my niece Jessica holding an oversized check for $37,000 from my parents for her European graduation tour. My hands shook as I stared at my phone, my stomach twisting into knots. The money meant for my daughter's future was now funding my niece's luxury vacation. That day changed everything. Looking back, I should have seen this coming. The signs were there all along, but I always made excuses for my parents. I'm Allison Patterson, 35 years old, and I've been a single mom since Megan was 3. Her father walked out on us, deciding family life wasn't for him after all. No child support, no visits, just complete abandonment. I was only 20 when Megan was born, and I had to drop out of college to care for her. My parents, Frank and Eleanor Reynolds, never let me forget what a disappointment I was. Getting pregnant so young, not finishing my degree, struggling financially, while my younger sister Stephanie sailed through life with their constant support and approval. They helped her with college tuition, her wedding, the down payment on her house. Meanwhile, I worked 3 jobs at times just to keep a roof over our heads. Despite everything, I was determined to give Megan the opportunities I never had. When she was 3, I started putting away money for her education. Sometimes it was just $10 a week, sometimes more, when I picked up extra shifts at the hospital. I eventually became an ER nurse after putting myself through nursing school with night classes while raising Megan. Every birthday, every Christmas, every tax return went straight into Megan's college fund. We lived in a small 2-bedroom apartment, drove an old car that broke down regularly and rarely took vacations. But it was worth it. Megan was brilliant. Straight. As throughout high school president of the science club volunteer at the local animal shelter. She dreamed of becoming a doctor, and I was determined to help her achieve that dream. By her senior year, we had managed to save $45,000. Not enough for her entire education, but enough to get her started without crushing debt. When she got accepted to her dream school with a partial scholarship, I felt like all our sacrifices had been worth it. Despite how my parents treated me, they always doted on Megan. She visited them regularly at their spacious suburban home, and they seemed genuinely interested in her academic achievements. I was grateful that at least they treated her well, even if they continued to favor my sister and her daughter Jessica. Jessica and Megan were the same age, and had just graduated from different high schools. Jessica was heading to an expensive private university, fully funded by her parents and my parents' contributions. Megan had received a scholarship, but would still need her savings to cover the remaining costs. Everything seemed to be going according to plan until last Tuesday. Megan had left her phone on the kitchen counter while she showered, and it kept buzzing with notifications. I glanced over, not meaning to snoop, but a text from my father caught my eye. The plan worked perfectly. She didn't suspect anything. Don't worry about the money, it's all taken care of now. My heart raced as I picked up the phone. I knew I shouldn't read my daughter's private messages, but something felt wrong. I scrolled up and saw fragments of a conversation about helping Grandpa with his medical bills and keeping it a secret from Mom for now. When Megan came out of the shower, I was sitting at the kitchen table with her phone in my hand. The look on my face must have told her everything. "Mom, I can explain," she said, clutching her towel tighter around herself. "What plan is Grandpa talking about, Megan? What money?" My voice was barely a whisper. Her face crumpled. "I was going to tell you once everything was okay. Grandpa needs heart surgery. It's really expensive, and not covered by insurance. They were too proud to ask you directly, so I offered to help. They didn't want to worry you." Help how exactly, I asked, though I already knew the answer. I could feel it in the pit of my stomach. "I gave them my college fund," she said, tears welling up in her eyes. "All of it. Grandpa could die without the surgery, Mom. I couldn't just let that happen when I had the money to help." The room seemed to tilt beneath me. 15 years of sacrifice gone in an instant. And something about this didn't add up. My father had excellent health insurance through his retirement package. Why would he need Megan's money? And why keep it a secret from me? When did this happen? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. 3 weeks ago when I visited them for the weekend. They told me they'd tried everything else. I transferred the money the next day. 3 weeks. They'd had her money for 3 weeks. And I hadn't noticed, because Megan managed her own account, now that she was 18. But what really struck me was that I'd spoken to my parents multiple times since then, and they hadn't mentioned anything about a heart condition or surgery. I tried calling them immediately, but they didn't answer. I sent texts, left voicemails. Nothing. My father, who was always glued to his phone, suddenly unreachable. That's when I knew something was very wrong. The next morning, after a sleepless night, I drove to my parents' house unannounced. Their car wasn't in the driveway, and no one answered the door. Their neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, was watering her flowers and called out to me. "If you're looking for your parents, they left yesterday for a week-long trip to Hilton Head. They were so excited about it, said they needed some relaxation before your father's big day." I thanked her and walked back to my car in a daze. A vacation. My father was supposedly in need of urgent heart surgery, but they were relaxing at a beach resort. None of this made sense. I drove to work in a fog, running through everything in my mind. 3 weeks ago, Megan had visited my parents alone. They told her a story about needing emergency heart surgery not covered by insurance. They convinced my trusting, compassionate 18-year-old daughter to give them every penny of her college fund. And now they were on vacation. During my lunch break, my phone rang. It was Stephanie, my younger sister. "Hey, Allie, I just wanted to thank you personally," she said, sounding cheerful. "Thank me for what I asked. For contributing to Jessica's graduation gift. Mom and Dad told me you wanted to help make it special for her. That's so generous of you, considering." Well, you know. My blood ran cold. Considering what, Stephanie? She paused. "Well, you know, your financial situation. Mom and Dad said you insisted on contributing even though they told you it wasn't necessary." "That's really sweet of you." I gripped the phone tighter. "What exactly is Jessica's graduation gift?" "Oh, didn't they tell you the details?" "It's a European tour. 3 weeks traveling through France, Italy, and Spain. First class, everything. She's been dreaming about it for years. The whole thing costs around $40,000, and apparently you kicked in quite a bit." I was surprised, to be honest. I ended the call quickly, saying I had an emergency at work. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone. $40,000 for a luxury vacation for my niece. Roughly the same amount as Megan's college fund. That evening, I sat Megan down and gently asked her to tell me exactly what had happened when she visited her grandparents 3 weeks ago. She described how they'd sat her down looking solemn and worried. Grandpa had explained that he needed a special heart procedure that wasn't covered by insurance. They'd exhausted their savings and investments, but were still short by $45,000. They showed me medical papers, Mom, Megan said, tears streaming down her face. They looked real. Grandpa even had a bandage on his chest where he said they'd done preliminary tests. They told her they couldn't ask me because I was already struggling financially, and they didn't want to burden me. They swore her to secrecy, saying they'd find a way to pay her back before college started. My poor trusting daughter had walked straight to the bank and transferred every penny we'd saved to my father's account. The next morning, I received a text from a number I didn't recognize. "Check your sister's Instagram." I clicked on the link and saw a post from 2 days ago. It was a photo of my parents, Stephanie, her husband, Greg, and Jessica, at an upscale restaurant. The caption read, "Celebrating Jessica's amazing graduation gift from Grandma and Grandpa Europe. Here she comes." In the comments, Jessica had written, "Thank you, Grandma and Grandpa, for the most amazing gift ever. $37 Kelvins. For the trip of a lifetime, $37,000. My daughter's college fund had been pillaged to send my niece on a luxury European vacation. The remaining $8,000 had apparently funded my parents' trip to Hilton Head. I immediately tried calling my parents again. This time my mother answered. "Allison, what a surprise," she said coolly. "We're on vacation. Is this urgent?" Yes, it's urgent, I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. I need to talk to you about Megan's college fund. There was a long pause. I don't know what you're talking about. Mom, I know everything. I know you told Megan that Dad needed emergency heart surgery. I know you took her $45,000. And I know you gave $37,000 of it to Jessica for a European trip. Another pause. Your father and I will discuss this with you when we return. This is not a conversation to have over the phone. You stole my daughter's future, I was shouting now. She worked so hard for that scholarship. And now she won't be able to afford college. Don't be so dramatic, Allison. Megan doesn't need an expensive university. The community college is perfectly adequate for someone like her. Jessica, on the other hand, has real potential. She's going to an elite school and deserves this experience to broaden her horizons. We'll talk when we get back. She hung up before I could respond. I sat there, phone in hand, absolutely stunned by what I'd just heard. Someone like her. My brilliant, hard-working daughter who dreamed of becoming a doctor didn't need a university education. But my niece deserved a $40,000 vacation. The pieces were starting to come together, but I still couldn't understand how my parents could be so cruel. I needed more answers, and I knew exactly where to go next. The next day was Saturday, and I knew Stephanie and her family would be home. I drove across town to their sprawling Tudor-style house in the most exclusive neighborhood in our area. As I pulled into their circular driveway, I noticed extra cars parked along the street. There seemed to be some kind of gathering happening. I rang the doorbell, and Greg, Stephanie's husband, answered. His smile faded when he saw me. Allison, this is unexpected. I need to talk to Stephanie, I said, pushing past him into their marble-floored foyer. The house was full of people dressed in cocktail attire, soft music playing in the background. I spotted Stephanie across the room, champagne glass in hand, laughing with a group of women I didn't recognize. Stephanie, I called out louder than I intended. The conversations around me died down as heads turned in my direction. My sister's face registered shock, then annoyance. She excused herself from her group and walked over to me, her heels clicking on the marble floor. Allison, what are you doing here? We're having Jessica's graduation party. We need to talk. Now. My voice was shaking. She sighed dramatically and led me to a small study off the main living area. As soon as the door closed behind us, I turned to face her. Did you know? I demanded. Did you know where the money for Jessica's European trip came from? Stephanie folded her arms across her chest. Mom and Dad said it was a combination of their savings and some contributions from family members, including you. Though I did find that part hard to believe. Well, you should have. Because I didn't contribute a dime. That money came from Megan's college fund. Our parents tricked her into giving it to them by claiming Dad needed emergency heart surgery. Stephanie's eyes widened in genuine shock. What? That can't be right. Dad is in perfect health. They've been planning this gift for Jessica for months. Months, I repeated. They've been planning to give Jessica $37,000 for months, while knowing that Megan needed her college fund. Well, yes, Stephanie admitted. They mentioned it at Christmas. They said Jessica deserved something special for getting into Princeton. They've been setting aside money specifically for this. I felt sick. They weren't setting aside their own money. They were figuring out how to take Megan's. They lied to her, showed her fake medical documents, even put a bandage on Dad's chest to convince her he needed surgery. Stephanie sat down heavily on a leather office chair. I don't know what to say. That doesn't sound like Mom and Dad, doesn't it? They've always favored you and Jessica. Remember when I needed help with Megan's childcare so I could finish nursing school? Mom told me I should have thought about that before getting pregnant. But when you needed help with Jessica so you could take that promotion, they watched her every day for 2 years. Stephanie had the decency to look uncomfortable. That was different. How? How was it different? She didn't answer. Do you know what Mom said when I confronted her? That Megan doesn't need a university education. That she's not like Jessica who has real potential. My daughter, who has a 3.9 GPA and dreams of becoming a doctor. Look, I'm sure there's an explanation, Stephanie said weakly. Maybe they really do intend to pay Megan back. With what money? They just spent it all on Jessica's trip and their own vacation. Our conversation was interrupted by a knock on the door. Greg poked his head in. Everything okay in here? The caterers are asking about serving the main course. We'll be right out, Stephanie said quickly. As Greg closed the door, I noticed a folder on the desk, labeled Jessica's Graduation, Europe Trip Details. Unable to help myself, I grabbed it and flipped it open. Inside were printouts of luxury hotel reservations, first-class flight tickets, and exclusive tour packages. Stapled to the front was a bank statement showing a deposit of $45,000 into my parents' account 3 weeks earlier and subsequent transfers to a travel agency totaling $37,000. There was also a receipt for an $8,000 deposit to Hilton Head Island Resort and Spa. They documented everything I whispered, holding up the bank statement. They took my daughter's money and spent it immediately so it couldn't be recovered. Stephanie reached for the folder. You shouldn't be looking through our private papers. I pulled back, flipping through more pages. Another document caught my eye. A letter from my grandfather's estate attorney. I scanned it quickly, my hands trembling. The Reynolds Family Education Trust, I read aloud. Established by our grandfather to provide equally for all his grandchildren's education. I looked up at Stephanie. Did you know about this? She avoided my gaze. It's complicated. Dad manages the trust as the executor. It says here that the trust contained $200,000 to be divided equally between Megan and Jessica for their education. $100,000 each. My voice rose. Where is Megan's money? I don't know the details, Stephanie said defensively. Dad handles all that. I continued reading, my anger building with each word. The letter, dated 6 months ago, expressed concern that funds were being withdrawn from the trust for purposes other than education, which violated the terms set by our grandfather. Everything suddenly became clear. My parents had been systematically stealing from both Megan's college fund and her trust fund inheritance. They had diverted her rightful inheritance to Jessica, and when that wasn't enough for their grand plans, they manipulated Megan into giving them the money we had saved. I stuffed the documents into my purse. I'm taking these. You can't do that, Stephanie protested. Those are our private documents. They're evidence, I corrected her. Evidence of fraud and elder abuse. Since they're misusing Grandpa's trust against his explicit wishes. I walked out of the study through the crowded living room and straight to the front door. As I passed the dining room, I saw Jessica showing something on her phone to her friends, all of them squealing with excitement. That's the hotel in Paris, I heard her say. It's 5-star and we're staying for 5 nights in the deluxe suite. The injustice of it all hit me like a physical blow. My daughter had given up her future to help her supposedly dying grandfather while her cousin was planning which 5-star hotels she'd be staying in, with that very same money. As I drove home, I called Megan. Honey, I need you to meet me at home. There's something important we need to discuss. It was time for her to know the whole truth. When I got home, Megan was waiting for me. I sat her down at our small kitchen table and gently explained everything I had discovered. As I laid out the bank statements and trust documents, her expression changed from confusion to disbelief to heartbreak. They lied to me, she whispered, staring at the travel receipts. Grandpa isn't sick at all. No, honey. He's perfectly healthy. They're on vacation in Hilton Head right now. Tears welled up in her eyes. But the medical papers they showed me. The bandage on his chest. All fake. They planned this for months, according to Stephanie. They needed your college money to fund Jessica's European trip. Megan's hands trembled as she picked up the trust document. And this? There was money set aside for my education from Great-Grandpa Reynolds. I nodded grimly. $100,000 that should have been yours. I don't know where it is now, but I'm going to find out. Why? Megan asked, her voice breaking. Why would they do this to me? I had no good answer. How could I explain to my daughter that her grandparents simply valued her less than her cousin? That they saw her as less deserving, less worthy of opportunity? I don't know, sweetie. But I promise you this, we're going to get your money back. All of it. And you will go to university as planned. My parents returned from Hilton Head 3 days later. I gave them 24 hours to settle in, then drove to their house with all the evidence I had gathered. It was time for a confrontation. They answered the door together, looking tanned and relaxed from their vacation. "Allison," my mother said coolly, "I suppose you're here about Megan's little donation to your father's medical care." "Cut the act," I said, walking past them into their immaculate living room. "I know everything. I have the bank statements, the travel receipts, and the trust documents." Their expressions changed immediately. My father's face hardened while my mother's eyes darted nervously between us. "What exactly do you think you know?" my father asked, his voice dangerously low. I laid out the documents on their coffee table. "I know you lied to Megan about needing emergency heart surgery to get her college fund. I know you immediately spent $37,000 of it on Jessica's European trip and $8,000 on your Hilton Head vacation. And I know you've been misappropriating funds from Grandpa Reynolds' education trust that should have gone to Megan." My mother sat down abruptly on the sofa. My father remained standing, his face flushed with anger. "You've been going through our private financial records," he demanded. "No, you left the evidence at Stephanie's house. In a folder literally labeled, Jessica's graduation, Europe trip details. Not exactly Fort Knox. You had no right to take those documents," he said. "And you had no right to steal my daughter's future," I countered. "I want it all back. The $45,000 from her college fund, and the $100,000 from her trust." My father laughed, a harsh sound without humor. "Or what? You'll sue your own parents. Drag the family through a public legal battle. Don't be ridiculous." "If that's what it takes, yes." My mother finally spoke up. "Allison, try to be reasonable. What's done is done. The money has been spent." "Not all of it," I argued. "Jessica hasn't gone on her trip yet. That money can be returned." "And disappoint Jessica." "Out of the question," my father said firmly. "Besides, Megan doesn't need an expensive university education. She can go to community college and transfer later if she still wants to. Jessica, on the other hand, is going to Princeton. She needs these kinds of experiences." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Megan is just as bright and hardworking as Jessica. More so, actually. She earned a scholarship. She wants to be a doctor. "Let's be realistic," my mother said with a condescending smile. "Megan is. Well, she takes after you, Allison. Jessica has her mother's polish and her father's business sense. She's going places. Megan would struggle at a top university." The casual cruelty of her words left me speechless. All my life I'd known they favored Stephanie, but I'd never realized they extended that same favoritism to our children, actively sabotaging Megan to benefit Jessica. "You know, Megan has a 3.9 GPA, right? That she's been accepted to one of the top pre-med programs in the state. That her professors at orientation specifically told her she has what it takes to go to medical school." My mother waved her hand dismissively. "Anyone can get good grades if they study enough. That doesn't mean she has what it takes for a competitive field like medicine." "And what exactly does Jessica have that makes her more deserving?" I demanded. "Connections," my father said bluntly. "Social skills. The right background. Things that matter in the real world. Allison, not just in textbooks." I stared at them, these people who had raised me, who I'd spent my entire life trying to please. For the first time, I saw them clearly. They weren't just playing favorites. They were actively harmful. "I want Megan's money back," I repeated. "All of it. The college fund and her trust. You have 3 days to figure it out." My father's face darkened. "And if we don't, then I go to the authorities with evidence of fraud, elder abuse, in misusing Grandpa's trust and financial exploitation of my daughter. I've already spoken to an attorney. This isn't just morally wrong. It's legally actionable." "You wouldn't dare," my mother gasped. Try me. I gathered up the documents and stood to leave. 3 days. And in the meantime, don't contact Megan. She's devastated by what you've done, and I won't let you manipulate her again. As I reached the door, my father called after me. If you do this, Allison, you're no longer part of this family. Neither is Megan. I turned back to face them. You made that decision when you stole from my child. We'll see who else in the family agrees with your version of events once they learn what you've done. I drove home with a strange sense of calm. For years I'd sought their approval, made excuses for their behavior, tried to protect Megan from the knowledge that her grandparents valued her less than her cousin. That ended today. When I arrived home, I found Megan sitting on our small balcony staring out at nothing. I joined her, taking her hand in mine. What did they say? She asked quietly. They refused to return the money, I admitted. But this isn't over. Not by a long shot. What are we going to do? College starts in 6 weeks. We're going to fight, I said firmly. And we're going to win. Little did I know just how complicated that fight would become, or how many more family secrets would be revealed in the process. The next morning, I called my friend Samantha Wright for advice. Sam and I had been friends since nursing school, but she had gone on to become a financial advisor, specializing in cases of financial elder abuse. If anyone could help us navigate this situation, it was her. We met at a quiet coffee shop away from my usual haunts. I didn't want to risk running into family members or their friends. This is seriously messed up, Allie, Sam said after I'd explained everything. She was reviewing the documents I'd gathered, making notes on a legal pad. Your parents committed multiple forms of fraud here. The fake medical emergency to get Megan's money is straightforward fraud. But the trust fund situation might actually be even more serious. How so? I asked, leaning forward. Your grandfather set up a trust with specific conditions. The money was for his grandchildren's education, divided equally. As the trustee, your father had a fiduciary duty to manage that money according to those terms. If he diverted Megan's portion to Jessica, or used it for non-educational purposes, that's breach of fiduciary duty, and could even be considered elder abuse, since it violates your grandfather's express wishes. Elder abuse. But my grandfather is deceased. Sam nodded. In legal terms, misusing a trust can still be considered elder financial abuse, even after the elder has passed away, because you're exploiting their inability to protect their assets and enforce their wishes. I sat back processing this information. So what do we do? First, we need more information. These documents prove that your parents received Megan's college fund and spent most of it on Jessica's trip and their vacation. But we need to track down what happened to the trust money. For that, we need a lawyer. Sam referred me to Laura Daniels, an attorney who specialized in trust disputes and financial fraud. I made an appointment for that afternoon. Laura's office was small but professional, located in a converted Victorian house downtown. She was a no-nonsense woman in her early 40s, with sharp eyes that missed nothing as she reviewed my documents. This is quite straightforward, she said when she finished reading. Your parents defrauded your daughter using false pretenses to obtain her college fund. That's criminal fraud. The trust issue is more complex but equally actionable. We'll need to petition the court for a full accounting of the trust. What does that mean exactly? I asked. It means your father, as trustee, will be legally required to produce all records relating to the trust, every withdrawal, every investment, every distribution since he took control of it. Based on what you've shown me, I suspect we'll find that he's been systematically favoring Jessica over Megan for years. Can we get Megan's money back in time for college? Laura tapped her pen against her desk. That's the tricky part. Legal proceedings take time, but there are faster ways to apply pressure. She outlined a multi-pronged strategy. First, she would send a formal demand letter to my parents, outlining the legal consequences if they didn't return Megan's money immediately. Second, we would file a petition with the probate court for an emergency accounting of the trust. Third, and most aggressively, we would prepare to file a police report for fraud if the first two approaches didn't yield results. Are you prepared to potentially see your parents face criminal charges? Laura asked bluntly. The question hit me hard. Despite everything, these were still my parents. The thought of them being arrested, possibly even serving jail time, was difficult to contemplate. But then I thought of Megan, who had worked so hard, and whose dreams were now in jeopardy because of their selfishness. If that's what it takes to secure my daughter's future, yes, I said firmly. Good. Because we need to be prepared to go all the way with this. Your parents need to understand that you're not bluffing. Laura drafted the demand letter that afternoon. It outlined in clear terms the legal violations my parents had committed and demanded full restitution within 7 days. It also demanded a complete accounting of the Reynolds Family Education Trust and the immediate removal of my father as trustee due to his breach of fiduciary duty. The letter was delivered to my parents the next morning by courier, requiring a signature to ensure they couldn't claim they hadn't received it. By noon, my phone was blowing up with calls and texts. Not just from my parents, but from Stephanie, her husband, various aunts and uncles, even family friends. Word had spread quickly and most people were outraged, not at what my parents had done, but at me for taking legal action against family. I ignored most of the messages, but I did take a call from my Aunt Patricia, my mother's sister. "Allison, what on earth are you doing?" she demanded. "Your mother is beside herself." A lawyer's letter. Really? Did she tell you why I sent the letter? Aunt Patricia. Did she mention that she and Dad stole my daughter's entire college fund by pretending Dad needed emergency heart surgery? There was a pause. She said there was a misunderstanding about some money Megan had offered to help with your father's medical expenses. I laughed bitterly. That's their version A. Misunderstanding. They showed my 18-year-old daughter fake medical documents. Dad put a bandage on his chest to make her think he'd had tests done. They told her to keep it secret from me because they knew what they were doing was wrong. Then they took her $45,000 and spent $37,000 of it on a luxury European vacation for Jessica. That can't be right, Aunt Patricia said, but I could hear the uncertainty in her voice. It is right. I have the bank statements and receipts to prove it. I also have documents showing they've been stealing from a trust fund my grandfather set up for Megan's education. They've been systematically stealing from my child to benefit Jessica. Aunt Patricia was quiet for a long moment. I need to think about this. I'll call you back. She never did. Instead, the next day, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was my father's sister, Aunt Diane. We had never been particularly close. She lived on the opposite coast and rarely attended family gatherings. Allison, it's your Aunt Diane. I just heard about what's happening with your parents and Megan's college fund. I need to talk to you. In person. I'm flying in tomorrow. Her tone was serious, urgent even. I agreed to meet her at her hotel the following evening. When I arrived at the hotel, Aunt Diane was waiting in the lobby. She was my father's only sibling, 5 years his junior, and they had never been close. Now I understood why. We settled in a quiet corner of the hotel restaurant, and she got straight to the point. What your parents did to Megan is horrible, but it's not the first time they've done something like this. They did the same thing to my son Trevor 15 years ago. I stared at her in shock. Trevor was my cousin who had struggled with addiction in his early 20s, but had turned his life around, and now ran a successful rehabilitation center in Oregon. What do you mean? Diane took a deep breath. When Trevor was 22 and just getting sober, his grandfather, my father, left him $50,000, specifically to help with his education once he was stable. Your father was the executor of the estate, just like he is for the Family Education Trust now. Let me guess. Trevor never saw that money, I said, a sinking feeling in my stomach. Not a penny. Your father claimed Trevor was too unstable, that giving an addict money would be irresponsible. He said he was protecting the money, until Trevor proved himself. Years later, when Trevor was clean and wanted to go back to school, the money had mysteriously disappeared. Your father claimed it had been used for administrative costs associated with the estate. That's awful, I whispered. It gets worse, Diane continued. After I confronted him, I discovered he had diverted similar bequests from at least 3 other relatives, always with a plausible explanation. Always positioning himself as the responsible protector of family assets. And always somehow benefiting Stephanie or Jessica in the end. Why didn't you expose him? Diane looked down at her hands. I tried. I consulted a lawyer just like you're doing. But your father is very good at covering his tracks. And very good at turning the family against anyone who challenges him. He convinced everyone I was bitter about our father's will and trying to get more than my fair share. By the time I realized what was happening, I was already isolated from most of the family. In the end, I gave up and moved to Seattle to start fresh. I sat back processing this new information. My parents' betrayal went far deeper than I had imagined. This wasn't a one-time terrible decision. It was a pattern of behavior that had hurt multiple family members over many years. I'm here to help you, Diane said firmly. I don't want Megan to suffer the same fate as Trevor and the others. I have documents, letters, bank statements, copies of my father's will that show a pattern of financial manipulation by your father going back decades. And I'm willing to testify if it comes to that. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a glimmer of hope. With Aunt Diane's evidence added to what I'd already gathered, we had a much stronger case. This wasn't just about Megan's college fund anymore. It was about bringing to light years of financial abuse and manipulation. There's something else you should know, Diane added. Your father has been telling family members that you're mentally unstable, that you've always been jealous of Stephanie, and that you're using Megan's college fund as an excuse to extort money from them. He's setting the stage to discredit you if this becomes public. I wasn't surprised. It was exactly the kind of manipulative tactic my father would employ. But now, with Aunt Diane's help and Laura's legal expertise, I had a fighting chance. That night, I updated Laura on everything Aunt Diane had told me. She was excited about this new evidence and asked to meet with Diane the next day to take her formal statement. This changes our strategy, Laura explained. With evidence of a pattern of financial abuse affecting multiple family members, we can approach the district attorney's office about potential criminal charges. That kind of pressure often leads to quick settlements in civil matters. As I hung up the phone, I felt a strange mix of sadness and determination. I had always known my parents favored Stephanie, but I never imagined they would stoop so low as to systematically steal from my child and others in the family. The depth of their betrayal was staggering, but I wasn't going to let them get away with it. Not this time. Megan deserved better, and so did all the other family members who had been victimized over the years. The next day, Laura, Aunt Diane, and I met to formulate our expanded strategy. With this new evidence, we weren't just fighting for Megan's college fund anymore. We were exposing decades of financial manipulation and abuse that had hurt multiple people. Little did I know that our investigation was about to uncover even more shocking revelations, turning what had started as a fight for Megan's college fund into something much larger and more consequential. With Aunt Diane's evidence and Laura's legal expertise, we formulated a comprehensive plan to recover Megan's money and expose my parents' years of financial manipulation. Laura explained that we needed to move quickly and decisively. Based on what Diane has shared, your father is very good at controlling the narrative and turning family members against anyone who challenges him, Laura said. We need to disrupt that pattern by taking multiple actions simultaneously. Our first step was filing formal complaints with several agencies, the County Elder Services Department, regarding the misuse of my grandfather's trust, the Financial Crimes Unit of the local police department concerning the fraud against Megan, and the State Bar Association's Committee on Trust Mismanagement. Laura also helped Aunt Diane file a belated complaint regarding the misappropriation of funds meant for her son Trevor. The statute of limitations had passed for criminal charges in that case, but the evidence still helped establish a pattern of behavior. While Laura handled the legal filings, I was tasked with a different assignment documenting the full extent of the Reynolds Family Education Trust. This meant tracking down the original trust documents, identifying all intended beneficiaries, and determining exactly how the money had been distributed over the years. Aunt Diane introduced me to her cousin Walter, a retired accountant who had helped with our grandfather's estate planning. Walter still had copies of the original trust documents and was horrified to learn how the funds had been misused. Your grandfather was very specific about his wishes, Walter explained, as we reviewed the yellowed pages in his home office. The trust was established with $200,000 to be divided equally between his grandchildren for educational purposes only. As additional grandchildren were born, the trustee was supposed to adjust the allocations accordingly. But the educational purpose was non-negotiable. So Jessica and Megan should each have received $100,000 for college, I asked. Walter nodded. That was the intention. And Trevor should have received his portion as well, along with your cousins on your mother's side. The trust was designed to benefit all grandchildren equally, regardless of which branch of the family they came from. This was an important revelation. It meant that my father hadn't just diverted Megan's trust funds to Jessica. He had systematically favored certain family members over others, in direct violation of my grandfather's wishes. With Walter's help, we constructed a detailed spreadsheet, showing the original allocations, how the money should have been distributed, and how it had actually been spent based on the limited records we had. The discrepancies were shocking. Over $1 million had flowed through the trust over the years, but only a fraction had been used for its intended purpose of education. Armed with this information, Laura filed an emergency petition with the probate court, requesting an immediate freeze on all remaining trust assets and a complete forensic accounting. The petition included affidavits from Aunt Diane Walter and 2 other family members who had come forward after learning about our investigation. Meanwhile, I had another unexpected ally emerge: Stephanie's husband, Greg. He called me late one evening, speaking in hushed tones. "Allison, it's Greg. I need to talk to you privately. Can we meet tomorrow morning at the Starbucks on Main Street?" The next morning, Greg arrived looking tense and uncomfortable. He ordered a coffee and led me to a table in the corner, far from other customers. I didn't know, he began without preamble. "About Megan's college fund or the trust money? Stephanie told me your parents were helping with Jessica's trip, but I assumed it was their own money. And now that you know," I asked. Greg ran a hand through his hair. "It's wrong. Plain and simple. I come from a family where this kind of thing would never happen. My parents took out a second mortgage on their house to help put me through business school. The idea of stealing from one child to benefit another." He shook his head. "I can't be part of this." "What about Stephanie? Does she feel the same way?" His expression clouded. "She's conflicted. Your parents have always made her feel special, chosen. It's hard for her to see them clearly, but I've told her I won't allow Jessica to take that trip with stolen money. It sets a terrible example." Greg had brought financial records from their home that showed additional transfers from my parents over the years, all coinciding with withdrawals from the family trust. Each time there had been a plausible explanation: help with private school tuition, a down payment on their house, seed money for Greg's business. But taken together, the pattern was undeniable. "I'm willing to testify if it comes to that," Greg said firmly. "And I want to make this right. We have savings. We can contribute to paying Megan back." His offer touched me deeply. It wasn't his responsibility to fix what my parents had done, but his moral compass wouldn't allow him to benefit from their wrongdoing. With Greg's evidence added to our growing case, Laura decided it was time to approach the district attorney's office. The combination of the fraudulent scheme to obtain Megan's college fund, the long-term misappropriation of trust assets, and the pattern affecting multiple family members was compelling enough to warrant a criminal investigation. 2 days later, a financial crimes detective arrived at my parents' home with a search warrant. They seized computers, financial records, and correspondence related to the trust and Megan's college fund. The official investigation had begun. News of the police search spread through the family like wildfire. Most relatives were shocked that things had escalated to this level. Some blamed me for involving law enforcement in a family matter. Others, who had their own suspicions about my parents' financial dealings over the years, reached out privately to express support. My mother called me, her voice shrill with panic. "What have you done, Allison?" "The police were here for hours. They took your father's computer, our financial files, everything. The neighbors saw. I told you I was serious about getting Megan's money back, I said calmly. This didn't have to happen. You could have done the right thing. They're saying your father could face criminal charges. Is that what you want? To see your own father in jail? What I want is justice for Megan, and for Trevor, and for everyone else Dad has stolen from over the years. The choice was always yours. You still have a chance to make this right, by giving in to your demands. Never. Your father and I have done nothing wrong. We'll fight this all the way. But their position wasn't as strong as they pretended. The next day, Laura received a call from Gerald Waters, a prominent attorney who had been retained by my parents. He wanted to discuss a potential settlement. They're feeling the pressure, Laura explained after the call. The criminal investigation has them scared. Waters suggested they might be willing to return Megan's college fund in exchange for dropping the criminal complaints. And the trust money, I asked. That's more complicated. Your father is claiming he made investment decisions in good faith, and that the trust lost value through market downturns. We'd need the forensic accounting to prove otherwise. We decided to counter with our own proposal. Full restoration of Megan's college fund, plus a complete accounting of the trust, and proper distribution of all remaining assets, according to my grandfather's wishes. In exchange, we would not oppose probation rather than jail time if criminal charges were filed. As the negotiations continued, Aunt Diane and I worked on another front. We reached out to every family member who might have been affected by my father's management of family funds. Slowly, more stories emerged. My cousin Ryan, who had been told there wasn't enough money in my grandmother's estate to fund the art school scholarship she had promised him. My second cousin Amanda, whose portion of a shared inheritance had mysteriously shrunk while my father was helping manage the estate division. Each story added to our case, showing a clear pattern of financial manipulation benefiting my parents Stephanie and Jessica at the expense of other family members. What had started as a fight for Megan's college fund had grown into a reckoning for decades of financial abuse. 9 days after our initial legal action, Laura called with exciting news. The forensic accountant finished his preliminary review of your parents' financial records. It's worse than we thought. Your father didn't just misappropriate trust funds. He commingled them with personal assets, used trust accounts as collateral for personal loans, and failed to file proper tax returns for the trust for several years. What does that mean for our case? It means the DA is ready to file multiple felony charges, fraud, embezzlement, tax evasion. Your parents' attorney knows this, which is why he called me again this morning. They want to make a deal, and they're ready to meet our terms. I should have felt triumphant, but instead I felt a profound sadness. My parents' moral bankruptcy was even deeper than I had imagined. What kind of people would systematically steal from their own family members, including their granddaughter, over so many years? The next day, Laura arranged for a formal settlement meeting at her office. My parents would be there with their attorney, along with a representative from the district attorney's office who would oversee the agreement. Be prepared, Laura warned me. Your parents will likely be hostile. They're being forced into this, and they'll blame you, rather than take responsibility for their actions. She was right. As I waited in Laura's conference room the following morning, I felt a knot of anxiety in my stomach. I was about to face my parents for the first time since our confrontation at their house. This time, with the weight of legal consequences hanging over them. Would they finally acknowledge what they had done? Or would they continue to justify their actions to see themselves as the victims, rather than the perpetrators? I was about to find out. And regardless of their response, I knew that our family would never be the same again. 10 days after our initial legal action, I sat in Laura's office waiting for my parents to arrive for the settlement meeting. The conference room felt too small, too warm, despite the air conditioning. Beside me, Aunt Diane squeezed my hand reassuringly. No matter what they say or do today, remember you're doing the right thing, she whispered. For Megan, for Trevor, for all of us. The door opened, and my parents walked in with their attorney, Gerald Waters. My father looked thinner than when I'd last seen him, his face drawn with stress. My mother's usual perfect appearance was slightly disheveled, her eyes darting nervously around the room. Behind them came a woman I didn't recognize, carrying a leather portfolio. Laura introduced her as Miss Reynolds, a court-appointed monitor who would oversee the implementation of our agreement. "She's no relation to your family," Laura added quickly. "Just a coincidence of names." We all took seats around the conference table. The tension was palpable, a physical presence in the room. Gerald Waters cleared his throat. "Before we begin, my clients would like it on record that they dispute many of the allegations made against them. They maintain that their management of family funds was always done with the best intentions." Laura nodded coolly. "Noted. However, the evidence speaks for itself. The forensic accounting of the Reynolds Family Education Trust shows systematic misappropriation of funds designated for specific educational purposes, and the fraudulent means used to obtain Megan Patterson's college fund are clearly documented." My father stiffened but remained silent. My mother stared down at the table, refusing to meet my eyes. Laura continued, "We've prepared a settlement agreement that addresses both the immediate issue of Megan's college fund and the broader mismanagement of the family trust. Miss Reynolds will explain the terms." The court monitor opened her portfolio and extracted a thick document. "This agreement contains several key provisions," she began in a crisp, professional voice. "First, Frank and Eleanor Reynolds will immediately return the sum of $45,000 to Megan Patterson's educational account, plus $5,000 in interest and damages." My mother made a small sound of protest, but my father silenced her with a look. "Second, Frank Reynolds will resign as trustee of the Reynolds Family Education Trust effective immediately. I will serve as interim trustee until a permanent replacement is appointed by the court. Third, a complete accounting of all trust activities for the past 15 years will be conducted, and any misappropriated funds will be restored from Frank and Eleanor Reynolds' personal assets." My father's face was stone, but I could see a muscle twitching in his jaw. "Fourth, proper distributions will be made to all intended beneficiaries according to the original trust documents. This includes retroactive educational funding for Trevor Bennett, Ryan Cooper, Amanda Langley, and any other family members who were denied their rightful allocations." Aunt Diane nodded in satisfaction beside me. "Finally, in exchange for these actions, Allison Patterson and the other affected family members agree not to pursue criminal charges, provided all terms are met in full and on schedule." The monitor looked up from her document. "Mr. and Mrs. Reynolds, do you understand and agree to these terms?" My father's voice was tight. "We understand." "Miss Patterson," the monitor asked, turning to me. "I agree to the terms," I said clearly. What followed was a solemn procession of signatures, initials, and notarizations. No one spoke beyond what was necessary for the legal process. When it was done, the monitor gathered the documents and stood. "I'll file these with the court today. The funds for Megan Patterson's account should be transferred by close of business tomorrow. I'll be in touch regarding the trust reorganization within the week." As she left, an uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Gerald Waters glanced between my parents and me, then diplomatically suggested he wait outside to give us a moment alone. Laura hesitated, but I nodded that it was okay for her to step out as well. Aunt Diane remained firmly by my side. When the door closed behind the attorneys, my father finally spoke. "I hope you're satisfied, Allison. You've managed to destroy this family. You did that, Dad?" I replied quietly. "When you decided that some family members were more valuable than others. When you stole from your own granddaughter." "We never stole anything," my mother insisted, finally looking up. "We were reallocating resources to where they would do the most good. Jessica has opportunities that Megan simply doesn't." "Because you made sure of it," Aunt Diane interjected sharply. "Just like you did with Trevor and the others." My father glared at his sister. "You always were bitter about Father's will, Diane. I'm not surprised you've joined this witch hunt." "This isn't about Dad's will, and you know it," Diane shot back. "This is about you systematically diverting family resources to benefit your favorites while lying to everyone else. It ends now." We had a right to determine how family resources were used, my father insisted. We knew what was best. No, I said firmly. You decided what you wanted, then manipulated and lied to get it. You didn't just fail as grandparents. You failed as basic human beings. What kind of people trick their own granddaughter into giving up her college fund by pretending to be dying? My mother flinched at that, but said nothing. Megan trusted you. I continued, my voice catching. She gave you her entire future because she thought her grandfather needed life-saving surgery. Do you have any idea what that did to her when she found out the truth? How devastated she was. She'll get over it, my father said dismissively. She's young. No, Dad. Some betrayals you never get over. You just learn to live with them. I stood up, gathering my purse and files. The money will help Megan go to college as planned, but nothing will repair what you've done to our family. If you think the rest of the family will thank you for this, you're delusional, my mother said bitterly. Everyone will know you dragged us through this humiliation because of your jealousy of Stephanie. I smiled sadly. Actually, most of them already know the truth. Aunt Diane and I have been in touch with everyone affected by Dad's financial manipulations. They're all named in the settlement, remember? And they'll all be receiving compensation. My father's face paled. You've contacted everyone. Everyone, Diane confirmed. Ryan, Amanda, Trevor, even cousin James, from the California branch. They've all shared their stories of how you mismanaged their inheritances and trust funds. This settlement isn't just for Megan. It's for all of them. My parents' expressions revealed the true impact of our words. They had assumed their careful manipulation of family narratives would protect them, that others would believe their version of events over mine. They hadn't anticipated that we would uncover the full extent of their financial misdeeds, or that so many family members would come forward with similar experiences. You've lost more than money today, I said quietly. You've lost the trust and respect of your entire family. That's on you, not me. With that, Aunt Diane and I walked out, leaving my stunned parents sitting in the conference room. It wasn't a joyful victory. There was too much sadness and loss involved for that. But it was a necessary one. The next day, true to the agreement, $45,000 plus $5,000 in damages was transferred into a new college account set up for Megan. When I showed her the statement, she burst into tears. I can go to college after all, she asked between sobs. My scholarship is still good. Yes, sweetie. I called the university and explained the situation. They're holding your place. You'll start as planned next month. Megan threw her arms around me. Thank you, Mom, for fighting for me, for believing in me. Always, I whispered, holding her tight. That's what real family does. Over the next few weeks, the consequences of our legal action rippled through the extended Reynolds family. The court-appointed monitor uncovered even more financial irregularities than we had initially found. My father was removed permanently as trustee of all family trusts and funds. Proper distributions were made to all the affected family members. Jessica's European trip was canceled, much to her disappointment. But Stephanie and Greg had an important conversation with her about integrity and consequences, explaining that the trip had been funded with money taken from her cousin. It was a hard lesson, but perhaps a valuable one. Most surprisingly, Stephanie reached out to me about a month after the settlement. We met for coffee, awkward at first, but gradually finding our way to a more honest conversation than we'd had in years. I didn't want to believe it, she admitted, that Mom and Dad would do something so terrible. It was easier to think you were exaggerating or misunderstanding. I know. They've always been good at controlling the narrative. She nodded. Greg helped me see it clearly. He showed me the pattern, how they'd always favored me and Jessica, while undermining you and Megan. I just accepted it as normal. I never questioned why. It's not your fault, I said, and meant it. They manipulated all of us in different ways. I want to do better, Stephanie said. For Jessica. For our family. Greg and I are setting up a college fund for Megan too, to supplement what she got back. We can't make up for everything, but we want to help. It wasn't a perfect resolution. Some family relationships were permanently damaged. My parents remained unrepentant, maintaining that they had done nothing wrong, despite all evidence to the contrary. But many bonds were strengthened as family members came together in the aftermath, supporting each other and establishing healthier patterns for the future. Megan left for college as planned, excited about her future in pre-med. The experience had changed her, making her more cautious, but also more determined to succeed and to always stand up for what was right. As for me, I learned powerful lessons through this ordeal. I learned that sometimes you have to fight for justice even when it's painful. That enabling bad behavior only allows it to continue and harm more people. That real family is defined by love, respect, and support, not by blood or titles. Most importantly, I learned that we are stronger than we know when we're fighting for those we love. I had always thought of myself as someone who avoided conflict, who tried to keep the peace. But when my daughter's future was at stake, I found a strength and determination I never knew I possessed. Sometimes the greatest act of love isn't shielding our children from all hardship, but showing them how to face injustice with integrity and courage. By fighting for Megan's future, I gave her something more valuable than money. I showed her what it means to stand up for yourself and others when it matters most. The road ahead won't be easy. Family gatherings will be awkward for years to come. Some relationships may never be repaired, but we move forward with clearer eyes and stronger boundaries, determined to build something better from the ashes of what was lost. If you've ever faced betrayal from those who should have protected you, know that you're not alone. Family dynamics can be complicated and painful, but you deserve to be valued and respected. Sometimes the hardest but most necessary thing is to stand up for yourself and those you love, even when it means confronting difficult truths. Have you ever had to make a tough choice between keeping the peace and fighting for justice? How did you handle it? Leave a comment below and share your experience. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more stories of overcoming family challenges. And share this video with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to stand up against manipulation and betrayal, even when it comes from family. Thank you for listening to my story. Remember, true family is built on love, respect, and honesty, not manipulation and favoritism. May you find the strength to create healthy boundaries in your own life and the courage to fight for what's right when it matters most.